The Sky Invasive Species Council presents Invasive Species and Land Ownership. We're a non-profit organization that aims to minimize the threat of invasive species impacting the environment, economy, and human health in the Sky corridor. We have a volunteer board of 6 directors and 20 advisors. We also have 13 staff members that are split between 2 teams. Our field crew works to remove and monitor invasive species, and the public outreach and education team holds events and provides resources for educating the public on everything invasive. We have over 500 society members that are committed to helping reduce the number of invasive species in the Sky region. The Sky region encompasses the C and D electoral areas of the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District, from Lions Bay up to Darcy. We're one of many invasive species councils in the province, and we work closely with our sister groups. The Invasive Species Council of BC, or ISC BC, is a province-wide council that works to organize and unify efforts and messaging between stakeholders and partners. We work to raise awareness, educate, and train the public, government agencies, and other land managers about invasive species and their impacts. We minimize introduction and spread of invasive species in the area through early detection and control, and coordinated integrated invasive species management efforts. We also work with local government to implement policies. So, what are invasive species? Well, they're plants or animals that come from another place, meaning they're not native, and they negatively impact human health, the environment, and/or the economy. Invasive species lack natural controls, such as predators or diseases, and so they eventually alter natural processes. Meanwhile, native plants maintain ecological integrity. There are so many reasons why we should care about invasive species. Ecologically, invasive species reduce habitat and food sources for both native plants and animals, which leads to an overall loss in biodiversity. They can also increase erosion and stream sedimentation, which affects fish and aquatic health. Some invasive species, such as Scotch Broom, also increases wildfire risk. Economically, invasive species can lead to a significant reduction in the quality and quantity of commercial crops, decrease structural integrity of buildings and roads, and can also reduce land values. Invasive species can spread due to a wide variety of human activities. People purchase and plant invasive species, often unknowingly. They also sometimes dump garden debris into parks, ditches, or wild areas, and this debris contains invasive species. Global shipping and transportation allow invasive species to jump continents, and recreational activities such as hiking, biking, and boating can easily transport invasive species across just our local areas. If we do nothing, invasive species will have large ecological and economic impacts. Without intervention, invasive plants double about every 5 years. Invasive plants reduce habitat for native plants and animals, as well as food availability, biodiversity, and they can even physically harm wildlife. Only 16 invasive species in Canada have been estimated to annually produce a cumulative cost of about $13.3 to $34.5 billion to Canadian fisheries, agriculture, and forestry industries. There are 5 key invasive species that we'd like you to be able to identify: the Himalayan Blackberry, Giant Hogweed, Japanese Knotweed, Scotch Broom, and European Fire Ants. The Himalayan Blackberry is a very common plant in the southern part of our region. It has white or pink flowers that are arranged in clusters of about 5 to 20. Its stems are stiff, thick, and have sharp green or red prickles. Their leaves are egg-shaped and a little bit fuzzy on the underside. The Himalayan blackberries are black, shiny, and hairless when they're ripe, and when they're unripe, they're either red or green. Birds and animals can help spread Himalayan blackberry when they eat their seeds. They're also able to propagate through a process called rooting. A piece of stem or root can be broken off, and then from there a new plant will grow. Himalayan blackberry inhabits low-lying elevations, usually clearings, disturbed sites, roadsides, stream banks, and many other sites. Himalayan blackberry is very dense and outcompetes other native plants for light and resources, thus reducing biodiversity. It's quick to grow, has sturdy stems, and prickly thorns which prevent humans and animals from moving through the bushes, and this limits wildlife and access to watercourses or trails. Himalayan blackberry can also reduce land value. Giant hogweed is a troublesome plant that can be difficult to remove because of its toxic sap. The giant hogweed gets its name from its size. It can grow up to 5 meters tall. Its flowers are small and white, arranged in a large, flat-top, umbrella-like cluster. Its hollow stems have reddish-purple blotches and are covered in bristles arising from blister-like pustules. Cow parsnip is a native species that looks very similar to giant hogweed, but it's generally much smaller, reaching only about 2 meters in height. The giant hogweed is primarily spread in contaminated soil as well as through wind dispersal. Each plant can produce up to 100,000 seeds. The giant hogweed thrives in moist, disturbed soil. It's very commonly seen along roadsides, railways, and has taken hold in areas throughout Squamish and Pemberton. The plant has toxic sap that causes burns, blisters, and painful dermatitis. If your eyes are exposed to the toxic sap, it could cause temporary or even permanent blindness. And ecologically, giant hogweed increases erosion and flooding hazards due to its shallow roots. It's also highly competitive and grows quickly, shading out other plants. The Japanese knotweed is a very inconspicuous plant, but although it looks harmless, it can quickly take over yards and fence lines. And to make matters worse, traditional methods of control can often actually help spread the plant and not destroy it. Japanese knotweed has clustering flowers that branch and bloom in late summer. Its leaves are 3 to 10 centimeters long and egg-shaped, with blunt knobs and veins on the undersides of the leaves. The stems resemble bamboo in that they're thick and hollow. The coloration of the stems is typically a reddish-brown. Knotweed spreads through contaminated soil, and they're very adept in rooting. So again, this is when a piece of stem or root can break off and then grow a new plant. And for knotweed, this can happen in just 6 days. This is why you should never mow or cut knotweed. Japanese knotweed is a highly adaptable plant, and it can inhabit a wide range of areas from moist soils to river cobble. It dominates rivers, creeks, roadsides, and beaches when it establishes. Japanese knotweed actually chemically impacts the plant surrounding it. It exudes biochemicals that negatively affect the growth and development of native vegetation. Large and lush, it also shades out other plants, reducing native plant growth. Japanese knotweed can also be very damaging to property. It grows quickly and can break up foundations, putting the structural integrity of infrastructure in jeopardy, thus reducing property values. It also undercuts roads and highways. It's easier to identify Japanese knotweed in the spring or summer during its growth cycle. Japanese knotweed is perennial, which makes it more difficult to see during the winter, because the above-ground portion of this plant dies off. In the spring, it looks like red asparagus with segmented stems and an alternating leaf arrangement. The Scotch broom is relatively easy to identify by its small, bright, yellow, pea-like flowers. Scotch broom forms large, dense bushes of ridge woody stems ranging from 1 to 3 meters tall. The leaves are small and the lower leaves are distinguished by the upper leaves in that they're stalked and composed of 3 leaflets. Scotch broom is dispersed by soil contamination and its seeds. The seed pods split and expel seeds up to 5 meters away, where they then can be moved further by wind, vehicles, or animals. Scotch broom tends to grow in open, well-drained, disturbed soils at low elevation. It's commonly seen along roadsides, especially around Squamish. The plant forms dense thickets, and the oil it produces is actually flammable, which increases the risk of wildfires. The dense thickets also displace native plants and animals. Scotch Broom is highly adapted to poor soils and has nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which allows it to grow but reduces the nitrogen available to other plants. Economically, the dense thickets obstruct sightlines on roads and utility right-of-ways, resulting in increased maintenance costs for removal. European fire ants originated in Europe and Asia. They were introduced to North America in the early 1900s and have increased their range ever since. European fire ants are small and thin, reaching about half a centimeter in length. They're reddish-brown and differ from native ants in that their waist has two segments, with two backward-pointing spines on the middle segment. They are spread in contaminated soil and mulch. The ants also form new colonies by budding, where a queen will leave the main colony with a group of workers to establish a new colony. European fire ants prefer moist environments, such as the west coast of BC. Irrigated lawns and gardens are ideal locations for their colonies. They're highly competitive and will displace native ant species. European fire ants are highly aggressive and tend to swarm when they're disturbed. They cause very painful stings that render gardens, lawns, and even parks unusable to the public. So, how do we get rid of invasive species? Well, treatment methods vary depending on the plant and the area. The primary tools used are either mechanical or chemical. Where possible and feasible, control work is done manually. Manual control strategies include pulling, cutting, digging, mowing, and excavating. Chemical control options include stem injection, cut and fill, and backpack foliar spray. All chemical control work done by SSISC is completed by certified pesticide applicators. Invasive species management is a multi-year process requiring an integrated approach. Complete eradication of an invasive species infestation typically doesn't occur after the first year of manual or chemical control due to several factors, such as a long-lasting seed bank in the soil, some plants' ability to regrow from a small section of a stem or root, and a resistance to herbicide. SSISC monitors control efforts following provincial standards and enters data into the Invasive Alien Plant Program (IAP) database. This allows SSISC to assess the progress and effectiveness of control efforts in our region. The information is then used during future decision-making to maximize the efficacy of future control efforts. To help, you can report invasive species by visiting our website. Take a photo of the invasive species and a GPS point using your phone when you come across an invasive plant or animal, and then you can upload that photo and the coordinate to our website at SSISC.ca/report. And as we mentioned earlier, seeds and invasive plant fragments can generate new plants, so moving soil can transport invasive plants to new areas and lead to new infestations. The best way to avoid this is to prevent the movement of contaminated soil. Inspect the excavation area for plants, root material, or seeds. Please do not move or transport soil that contains invasive plants. You should be aware of any regulations related to soil movement in your area, as a permit might be required. For example, the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District requires a permit if the soil deposited or removed is more than 10 cubic meters. For more information regarding regulation and best soil practices, you can visit our website at ssisc.ca/digsmart. Be sure to disclose any information regarding invasive species to homeowners and potential buyers. Many invasive species, including the ones we've highlighted here today, have the potential to damage property or be harmful to human and animal health. For example, not disclosing the presence of Japanese knotweed could be considered a latent material defect, especially if the sale occurs in winter, as the above-ground plant dies off in winter. Weeds don't respect fence lines. When you're looking at a property, be sure to walk the perimeter and peek over fence lines into neighbors' properties to check for any damaging invasive species. Take photos of any curious plants and check with experts if you have any questions. Contact us. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for joining us for this short course.